Something already closed behind you. Not later. Not soon. Already. Sophia, the ancient name for divine wisdom itself, has a way of sealing a timeline the moment it stops serving your growth. She doesn't wait for you to be ready. She doesn't ask permission. The moment your soul finishes what it came to learn on that line of probability, she closes it. Quietly. Permanently. And once she seals it, that door doesn't open again. Not for old patterns. Not for old people. Not for the version of you that used to live there. This teaching is attributed to Jesus, passed down through hidden spiritual traditions that never made it into the mainstream story you were taught in any building with a steeple. In these traditions, Christ isn't just a historical figure in a robe 2,000 years ago. He's a pattern, a frequency, a force that locks wisdom into place once it's been earned through lived experience, not belief alone. I believe you're watching this video because something in you already knows. You felt a shift, maybe weeks ago, maybe last night, lying in the dark with your mind oddly still. And you've been quietly asking yourself if it's real, or if you're imagining it just to feel like your pain meant something. It's real. And by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly which moment sealed it for you. Because what I'm about to explain isn't taught in churches, and it isn't taught in mindfulness apps either. It's older than both, and far less interested in being comfortable. Let's get something straight before we go further, because this word timeline gets thrown around so loosely online that it's lost most of its meaning. Think of it as a probability line, one version of your life running on repeat, built from your habits, your wounds, your relationships, and your fears. You've been living on that line for years, maybe without ever noticing the walls of it, because walls you've never seen the other side of don't feel like walls. They feel like reality. Sophia, in this hidden framework, is the wisdom intelligence that designs the pattern of your life. She's not a goddess sitting on a throne far away from you. She's closer to an inner architect, the part of existence that knows exactly when a lesson has been learned and when it's time to tear down the old blueprint and build something new in its place. She doesn't ask if you're scared. She doesn't negotiate. She simply finishes the design once the design has done its job. And Christ, the logos, the ordering principle behind Jesus' teaching, is what locks that new pattern into place. He doesn't just inspire people from a distance. He seals. He finishes what Sophia designs, the way a signature finishes a contract that's already been agreed to in every other way. Here's my honest take. I think most people miss the moment their timeline closes because they're waiting for something dramatic, lightning, a vision, a voice booming from the sky. But it's never that loud. It's quiet, almost boring, which is exactly why so many spiritual seekers walk right past the most important moment of their life without realizing it happened. You didn't walk past it. That's why you're here. You know the moment I'm talking about, even if you've never said it out loud to anyone. You woke up at some strange hour, maybe 3 in the morning, maybe just an ordinary Tuesday, and your hand moved toward your phone out of pure habit. You were about to check on someone who used to control your peace with a single text message or a single silence that stretched on for hours. And then you stopped. Not because you forced yourself to, gritting your teeth through the urge like you'd done 100 times before. There was nothing pulling you anymore. The ache wasn't there. The hook wasn't there. You looked at your own hand hovering over the screen and you felt nothing. Not coldness, not bitterness either. Just quiet. That quiet is not numbness. A lot of people mistake stillness for emptiness, and those two things are not the same at all. This was the opposite of empty. This was completion. In the old framework, that moment is the seal. That's the exact second Sophia closed the loop and Christ locked it shut behind you, like a door settling into its frame for the last time. You didn't lose your feelings. You didn't become cold or detached from life. You graduated out of needing that particular feeling to feel whole. I think this is the single most underrated spiritual experience there is. Nobody throws a parade for it. Nobody writes a song about the night you simply stopped caring in the way you used to care. But that night mattered more than almost anything else that's happened to you this year, even though it looked like nothing happened at all. Here's the first proof this already happened to you. Think about an old conflict, a recurring argument, a pattern with a parent, a friend, an ex, even a job situation that kept repeating itself like a scene you'd already watched a dozen times. At some point, it just stopped. No final fight, no apology, no dramatic conversation that tied it up with a bow and gave you a tidy ending to point to. It just stopped happening, the way a song fades out without ever really finishing. Most people panic when this happens because they're used to wanting closure. They go looking for an explanation, a conversation, an apology that will never come. But here's my opinion: closure was never the goal. Expiration was the goal. A contract that expires doesn't need a signature ending it. It simply stops applying to your life. The loop didn't resolve the way you imagined, because it didn't need to resolve at all. It expired because your vibration moved past the frequency that kept generating it, the same way a radio station fades out once you've driven far enough from the tower. I think this is the part most spiritual teachers skip, because it isn't pretty, and it doesn't make for a satisfying story. It feels like an open question nobody answered, like a sentence that just trails off. But an open question with no further chapters is still an ending. Maybe the cleanest kind there is, even if it doesn't feel clean in the moment. The second sign is harder to explain, because it isn't about other people at all. It's about you, and the parts of you that used to feel impossible to live without. Think about something you used to crave constantly, a habit, an old identity, a way you used to need to be seen or validated by people whose opinion felt like oxygen at the time. Notice how it just faded, almost without your permission. Not because you fought it with willpower or white-knuckled your way past it every day. It simply lost its grip on you, like a hand that finally let go. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who spent his life studying the unconscious mind, called this kind of shift individuation, the process where an old version of the self dissolves so a more complete version can take its place. He wasn't talking about literal death. He was talking about symbolic death. The ego layer that used to run your decisions quietly steps aside, the way an understudy finally leaves the stage once the real performance begins. I find this sign the most personal one of all four, because it doesn't show up in your relationships or your circumstances where other people can see it. It shows up in the mirror, in private, when no one else is watching. You look at old photos of yourself, and you don't recognize the hunger in your own eyes anymore. That hunger belonged to a timeline that already closed, and you're looking at a stranger wearing your old face. The third sign is the strangest one, and it's the one I get asked about the most. Repeating numbers showing up everywhere you look. Clocks that always seem to catch you at the same digits, no matter how random the timing should be. A feeling that time itself is moving differently than it used to, slower in some moments, almost compressed and rushed in others, like the universe is editing the footage of your own life. In Gnostic tradition, Sophia's story includes a fall and a restoration, wisdom losing her place in the higher order, scattering pieces of herself, then slowly finding her way back into alignment. Valentinus, an early Gnostic teacher whose writings shaped how Sophia was understood, described this not as punishment for a mistake, but as a necessary detour on the long road back to wholeness. I see the number patterns and the time distortions as an echo of that same myth playing out personally in your own life. You fell out of alignment with your old timeline at some point, maybe without even noticing. Now you're realigning piece by piece. And realignment doesn't feel smooth while it's happening. It feels glitchy, almost like your nervous system is recalibrating to a new setting it hasn't fully adjusted to yet. I personally think this sign gets dismissed too quickly as just noticing patterns, because the brain likes order. I don't buy that explanation, not fully. I think your attention gets pulled toward these moments because something underneath the surface is finishing a recalibration you didn't consciously request, but your soul clearly did. The fourth sign is the one that hurts the most, even though it's actually a form of protection disguised as loss. People start leaving your life without conflict, without warning, without any obvious reason you can point to later. No falling out. No final argument that at least gives you something to be angry about. They just drift, slowly and quietly, and the drifting feels almost peaceful, which somehow makes it more confusing than if they'd slammed a door on their way out. In the Christ pattern, this is described as pruning, not punishment, not rejection. Gardening. Branches get cleared not because they did something wrong or failed you, but because new growth needs room, and a tree cannot hold every branch it has ever grown without collapsing under its own weight. I think this is the sign people misread the most often. They assume quiet endings mean something failed, that they did something wrong, that they should have fought harder to keep that person close. I don't see it that way. A loud ending usually means there's unfinished energy still circulating between two people. A quiet ending means the lesson is fully digested already. There's nothing left to extract, so it releases on its own. The way ripe fruit lets go of the branch without anyone needing to pull it. It still aches, and I'm not going to pretend it doesn't. But the ache here is more like the soreness after a deep stretch, not the sharp pain of an injury that needs tending. Now here's the part I really want you to sit with. because this is the core of everything we've talked about so far, and it's the reason this video exists. Once Sophia and the Christ pattern seal a frequency, the old loop genuinely cannot come back. Not because some cosmic rulebook forbids it like a punishment waiting to be enforced. Not because you're being tested to see if you'll slip up. It's much simpler than that, and more elegant than any rulebook could ever be. The vibrational match is simply gone. Think of it like a radio station you used to listen to every day. You can't tune into that frequency anymore, not because your dial is broken, but because your equipment has changed entirely. The old timeline required a version of you that no longer exists. Without that version of you generating the same signal day after day, the old pattern has nothing left to attach itself to. It's not locked out, it simply has nowhere to land. This is the strongest opinion I'll give you in this video. I think this is the most liberating piece of hidden teaching most people never get to hear in their lifetime. So many spiritual seekers live in constant fear of relapsing into old timelines, old relationships, old wounds, old versions of themselves they thought they'd outgrown. But if the seal is real, relapse isn't even possible the way you fear it would be. You might remember the old pattern clearly. You might miss certain pieces of it on a hard day. But you cannot live inside it again, because the structure holding it together has already dissolved. That orb of light some traditions describe around a sealed soul isn't decoration. It's a boundary. And boundaries, once truly closed by something as deliberate as Sophia and Christ working together, hold. So where does that leave you, sitting here with all of this settling into your chest? Probably somewhere between relief and uncertainty, and that's a completely normal place to be standing. Closing a timeline doesn't hand you a map for the next one. It just clears the table completely. And an empty table can feel exciting in one moment and terrifying in the very next breath. I want to say this directly to you, not as some vague encouragement meant to make you feel better for 5 minutes. You are not starting from zero, no matter how empty things might feel. You're starting from everything the old timeline taught you, minus the weight it used to force you to carry every day. That's not nothing. That's an enormous advantage most people never get to experience. Because most people keep recycling the same closed loop their entire lives without ever feeling the seal happen the way you just did. You felt it. That puts you ahead, even if it doesn't feel that way standing here right now in the middle of the unknown. Whatever shows up next in your life is going to be built on a frequency you haven't fully met yet, one you haven't even had the chance to recognize. Let that excite you instead of scaring you into freezing up. You've already done the hardest part. You let something close without forcing it back open out of fear or habit, which is more than most people will ever manage to do. So if you recognized even one of these signs, the loop that stopped without resolution, the old self going quiet in the mirror, the numbers and the bent sense of time, the people who left without ever raising their voice, then I think you already know the truth underneath this entire video. You've been shifted. Sophia designed it with more precision than you'll ever fully understand. Christ sealed it the moment it was ready to be sealed. And it will not repeat, no matter how many times your mind tries to convince you otherwise on a hard night, because the version of you that lived there is already gone. Tell me in the comments which sign hit you hardest. I read every single one, and I genuinely want to know which moment was yours, because every story like this matters more than people realize. If this gave you language for something you felt but couldn't quite explain to anyone around you, subscribe, because this channel exists for exactly that purpose, naming the things hidden teachings have always known in plain, ordinary words. Your previous timeline is closed, sealed by wisdom, locked by Christ, and gone for good. What comes next is yours to build, one quiet decision at a time.